Mema?
Yeah.
Okay, so now it's recording.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, Joel.
Hi, Mema.
Hi.
The first question is, what was your life like before the Germans took over?
Well, I was a very little girl, and it was very normal. I had a family. We had lots of wonderful neighbors. I had lots of aunts and uncles and cousins, and we used to always get together, I know, on every Friday night, and Sunday we would all go into the park, and we would have a very nice life. My father made a nice living. He was in the export-import line of fabrics, and I remember it was very nice, but I was very little, and I remember that they put me into kindergarten, and I loved going to kindergarten, and I remember that they always gave you hot chocolate, and I hated it because the Belgian hot chocolate is bitter. They don't put sugar in it. But those are wonderful memories I have until the Germans came into Belgium, and I was around 5 years old, and I remember that everybody looked very unhappy, and I didn't understand it. So that was the end of an enchanted life, of peaceful life that I had. Is there another question?
Yeah, the next question was, when did you start to see change in your everyday life?
Well, the first change was I remember hearing bombardments. And I remember my mother and father and my sister, who's older than me, running around the apartment where we lived, and they were packing things. And I remember my father said, only what you can carry. And I remember thinking of, what can I carry? What can I carry? I have to carry something. And my mother gave me a pillow to carry. And it was light, and it was my cuddly pillow. And then I remember running. We all ran, and this is not exactly a memory, but I was told that everybody ran to north, to the English Channel, to Ostend and Knock and all those towns near, so that we could run to England. Everybody thought of running to England. Very few people thought, if you look at the Belgian map, to run. Naturally, you couldn't run to Germany, but you were thinking you couldn't run to Holland. It was already occupied. And you couldn't run. And when I mean run, that means bicycles, people walking, people taking horse carriages, no cars, because cars need gasoline, and you could already not get gasoline. So these horse-drawn carriages that the farmers use to bring the wheat or whatever they carry. Those are the things I remember. The roads being filled with people going someplace, and I found out it was going to Ostend, and we were too late because all the British who were in the English Channel had been bombarded. And I do remember one memory, that I never knew that the sea was red. It was like an orange red. And I was fascinated. I was scared. My mother and my uncle carried me back and forth. They were holding me. And I kept looking down at the sea. And I was looking at the sea, and I asked my mother, why is the sea orange? Why is it red? And she said it was from all the ships that had sunk, that the Germans had sunk, all the British ships, and it was the oil that spilled out of them. And that's my memory, my most vivid memory, that there was no blue sea. It was red and orange. And I remember that was the first time in my life that I knew that I was shaking, and I kept saying to my mommy, Mommy, I'm not cold, but I'm shaking. Why am I shaking? And she explained to me that you shake when you're scared. And that's when I learned what it was to be scared. We couldn't go it was closed, and everybody turned around, and we went back to Antwerp, which is the city in Belgium that is the capital of diamond making. They don't find the diamonds there, but they polish them and they make them into jewels. So Antwerp is a very important city, and many, many Jews live there because the diamond industry is an easy industry for Jews who could never own land, couldn't own really our stores, and couldn't hold anything like real estate. But diamond is a thing that you can transport easily, or you can make money into diamonds or diamonds into money. So that's why Jews were into the diamond business, because it was one of those industries that they were permitted to own and to run. And so that's how come Jews were in the diamond business. And that's actually originally why Jews were also in the money lending business, because in the 9th and 8th century, when the kings wanted to collect taxes from the peasants, they sent the Jews out to collect the taxes, because in case somebody gets killed collecting the taxes, the Jew didn't count. And when the Jew realized that carrying the money, the cash, and the farmers would come back and say to him, lend me money so I can buy a cow, that's how we became money lenders. Not because we chose to be. If we had the choice, we would be sitting here reading the Bible or the Torah, and that was our lives. But the world forced us into certain industries. And why are we also so good at other things is because we had no choices. And then that is how my life changed, knowing that I was different. I also asked my best little friend, who was a Gentile little girl who lived downstairs, and she said to me, you know what you are? You are a dirty Jew. And I looked at her and I said, what is a dirty Jew? And she said, a dirty Jew is someone that has a very long, crooked nose and is dirty. And I knew that I wasn't dirty because my mother gave me a bath that day in the morning, every morning. And I ran to look in the mirror, and I knew that I didn't have a long nose. But I knew it had to be written on my nose. So from that point on in my life, for the next 5 years, anyone who would talk to me, I would hold my hand in front of my nose because I didn't want them to know that I'm Jewish. I also got into the habit of taking baths many times a day, thinking that there must be something. If you're a Jew, you're dirty, until almost at the end of the war that I realized one had nothing to do with the other. It's just a bad thing that people call each other. Anyway, that's how my life changed intellectually too, because I learned fear. I learned to be ashamed of something that I had nothing to do with. And I also learned to be extremely attached to my family, because at the end it's really the family that saves you. You don't know who is against you and who is for you, because like my best little friend, Hollande was her name, turned against me. Next question.
So I wrote in my 5-page paper about you telling me the banana story when I was growing up, and how you'd always tell it as a happy story. Would you want to tell them that story?
Oh, sure. When we finally, my dad had to leave Belgium earlier because the rumors were that the Germans are going to pick up all the men to work in factories in Germany. So never in history, in the whole history of the world, did ever anyone go after women and children. It was always the men. So therefore, the men, if they could get away, they went away. And the only place to go away at that time was what it was called Free France. There was Vichy France and Free France, and that's where most of the Jews were trying to go to. Free France, which is southern France, which is where Cannes is, where Nice is, and that's where everybody wanted to go. Also, it was the furthest away from Germany, and it was also the closest to Spain. So people were hoping that maybe they could go through the Pyrenees to Spain. There was one other place that they were thinking of, and that was Switzerland. Switzerland was a free-thinking nation, supposedly. But they didn't. They closed all the Alps, and no one could run into Switzerland. And we are talking about 1942, where it was the worst, where everybody was running. 1942. This is 2 years after Belgium was already invaded. When we finally, which is a long story, my mother followed my father. We went through many, many dangers, my mother, my sister, and myself. By that time, they knew that they're going to go after children and women, and somehow they started having rumors that once they pick them up, you don't hear from them. Nobody knew about the gas chambers, and no one yet knew about the slave camps. But they knew that their people were disappearing, and they were disappearing in villages that everybody knew, but the villagers supposedly didn't know what was happening until they saw smoke coming out of certain chimneys and certain smells, and they knew that something bad was happening, and that's when you had Auschwitz and the gas chambers, but that happened in 1943. Anyway, my sister, my mother, and I made it to Nice. We got to where my father is, and there, all of a sudden, it became extremely dangerous again. And my sister and I were put into an orphanage. Orphanage was the best place to be because you didn't know which one were the Jewish children and which one were not, especially little girls. Boys could not go into the orphanages because they were circumcised. And when they came to inspect the orphanages, they looked to see if there were any Jewish boys or Jewish girls, and everybody denied it. But the little boys could not hide the fact. And in those days, only Jewish children were circumcised. So my sister Lily and I were in that orphanage, and my parents left because that orphanage, we were promised that we would end up being in Spain, from Spain to Portugal, from Portugal to South America, to freedom, because the United States, Roosevelt had closed the borders. So we couldn't come into the United States, but we could go into Cuba, we could go to South America. These were the only places in the world still open to any of us. We were in that orphanage, and we were very hungry. And my parents walked the Pyrenees. It took them 3 months to walk from Pau, which is the bottom of the French Pyrenees, across the Pyrenees, because they wanted to say goodbye to us in Barcelona. The boat was supposed to land a dock in Barcelona. My sister and I were taken to Marseille to go on the boat, and we arrived too late. I'm not going to go into the story why we got there late, but we saw the boat taking off. Now we had to go back, and we went back into the orphanage, and it wasn't good in the orphanage. It was. I have good memories because I was played. I was very little. But I do remember looking for food. We found that certain grass you could eat. There were dates that were falling off the trees, but they were usually still green. but they were edible. We were very, very hungry. And as I was hungry, the last thing that my mother had offered me was a banana. And I did not like bananas when I was very little. And I said, I don't want a banana. And when I got very hungry, I kept always thinking, if I had only had a banana now, I wouldn't be hungry. I would be happy. My stomach wouldn't hurt from hunger. I wouldn't have all those sores on my body from malnutrition. Could I only have that banana? And it became a thing for me. Anyone who was nice to me, I would say to them, do you have a banana? Naturally, they did not have a banana. My parents now arrived in Barcelona, and the boat arrives in Barcelona, and they don't have the two little girls, my sister and I. And they went absolutely berserk. Anyway, I'm not telling you how finally they found which orphanage we were. They had no idea what orphanage we were in. And they got money together from all of their friends all the Jewish people in Barcelona were there at the time. And they hired a smuggler, a Pyrenees man from the Pyrenees, a Basque. He's called Basque. And he came to the orphanage, which was Le Rayon du Soleil, the rays of the sun. That was the name of this orphanage. And he came to the gate, and it was like an old villa that someone had left, and it became an orphanage. And he asked the kids, who is Lily? And they pointed. And he approaches my sister. I know I was playing outside, and I see that man approaching my sister. And he said to her that he's here sent by her father and mother to take her back to Spain. And she said she does not have a father and mother because she is an orphan as well as her little sister, and we came from another place, and we were here. We knew that the Gestapo was looking through all the orphanages to find Jewish children, and she figured that man is a Gestapo man who's coming around questioning all these children if they had fathers and mothers, and if they had fathers and mothers, that meant that they're Jewish, they're not orphans. And so therefore she sent him away, and he went all the way back from Cannes to Barcelona, and my parents found out that my sister wouldn't go, but they were already happy. Now they knew at least that my sister Lily and I are alive. He comes back this time through my father, and now he has past things. He knows things about us. He tells Lily definitely who her father is. He tells her what my father used to call her as a secret little name, all the things that we liked. She trusts him, and we leave at that moment. I don't want to leave. I'm afraid. And she turned to me and she said, wherever we go, you're going to have a banana. And I followed. Oh, yes, the word banana was fine. Now it takes us about 2 months to get to the border of Spain and France. And I'm making these very short stories because there's a lot of things that happen in between. And we get to border of Spain. It's in the Pyrenees. The Pyrenees are the most treacherous of all mountains. They're very pointy. They're very hard to walk on, and they're also very icy. And we get to, the smuggler takes us to a lake that was frozen, completely frozen. And on top of the lake, there is a bridge that takes from one side of the mountain to the other mountain. And the smuggler says to us that when the guards, the German guards, change, we have to run on that frozen lake to the other side and hide in that barn. And he points a barn on the other side of that lake. And it happens, we're sitting there freezing. I had frozen feet at the time, so I was having a very hard time walking. And my sister said, now we have to go. The smuggler had left us. Now we have to go. And I said, oh, no, I'm not going. And she said, you got to go. And I said, no, I'm not going. And she said, I'm sure, I'm positive, on the other side of the lake, there is bananas. I know there's bananas. And she got me convinced, and I ran across on that lake. And it's a big lake, at least in my mind of a little girl. It was a huge lake. It was an ocean, but I don't know. Anyway, we get to the other side. We're in the barn. In the morning, there's a woman comes and picks us up and takes us to the police station. Because at the police station, I guess we would have been safe, and they were going to go look for our parents at that point. And that was the safest place in Spain to be at the time. We arrived at the police station, and they start questioning us. How did we get there? And my sister always has to answer all the questions. And who are you? And what are you? And how did you get here? From where did you get here? There's a lake. How did you get here? And she's asking, and they're asking all these questions. And I'm sitting there, and I'm starting to cry. And she says, good cry, they're going to have pity on us. And one of the people said, why are you crying? They promised me a banana. And they went and got me a banana. It was the first banana I had since my mother had left, which was 3 years before. And I'm eating the banana, and they keep questioning my sister. And she turns to me in French, and she said, pleure, cry. And I look at her, and I said, she's crazy. Why would I cry? I finally had my bananas. I was happy. I was satisfied. So she pinched me hard, and I cried, and they stopped questioning her, and they finally called some people, some agency. The agency picked us up, and we ended up being reunited with my parents. My mother and my father waited for us at the station, and when I saw them, they ran over and they picked us and hugged us. And I looked at my mother in absolute shock. First of all, I didn't have great, clear memory of her because I've been separated from her for so long. And she said, what's the matter, sweetheart? Why are you looking? I said, I thought you were going to bring me a banana. That's all it was important to me at that time. And I remember. And now, anytime I see a banana, I think of the fact that, to me, that was peace and satisfaction and freedom. Anyway, I'm not going to go into all the other stories, how we ended up hiding there and being just very scared also at one point in Spain because we didn't know what was going to happen to us. Do you have another question?
No, I think that's all I need.
Is it too long? Because I'm cutting it very, very short.
Well, my presentation only needs to be about 15 minutes, so...
So is it 15 minutes?
Yeah, well, I have to talk during the presentation anyway, so I think we have...
okay, but the... I can I just finish the story that we ended up going to a place that this was 1945, which is now the war in Europe is finishing, and they were now the American agencies were sending boats, not for the United States, but there were agencies that were willing to pay for boats, and there were people who were leaving for South America not many. When I say people, there may have been 20 people or 5 families here, or 5 families there. And there was a choice of another boat that was leaving for Palestine. At that time, Israel was called Palestine because the British were occupying it. There was no Jordan. It was called Transjordan. All these names were what the British gave at the time. The British occupied that whole area, always. Anyway, we got on a boat that was leaving for Palestine, and we arrived in Haifa, at the port of Israel, and I looked down, and people were standing on the port, hundreds and hundreds of people, so happy to see us because we were the only boat, Jewish boat, that the British allowed to come in because they were afraid that the Arabs wouldn't give them oil. And the Arabs were not letting the Jews come in. That's why a lot of the Jews were smuggled into to Palestine. It was still called Palestine until 1948. And it just, the reason that they let us go to come in on the Mediterranean from Barcelona to Haifa, because they didn't know where it was mined, and they let the boat go on the Mediterranean to find out which is the best route, because then they'll know where the mines are or where not or not. So it wasn't such a nice thing that they did. It worked out well because we didn't go over a mine, but there was another reason that they let us in. And that's a little piece of the other story. And when we got to Palestine, it was starting to be filled with Jewish orphans from Poland, from France, from Czechoslovakia, that families were had hidden during the war, and they sent them to the free country. The United States was not yet open to anybody. They just started. Roosevelt just started opening the ports for us to come in. I don't remember exactly what year he opened them. It was 44 or 45. I don't remember that. And I don't know. I should look it up. These are very short stories, but I didn't have a terrible story. Mine was survival. I always had my sister with me. I did learn also that you can cry from sadness and from happiness. Because when I got to Palestine, there was a letter waiting for me from a little friend that I had, a Jewish friend, who was hidden like Anne Frank all through the war, but was saved. And she wrote a little letter, and she says, "Judy, wherever you are you alive? I'm alive." And I burst out crying. And I was embarrassed. I was ashamed that I cried. And my mother told me that people can cry out of happiness, not only out of sadness. And that was something that I learned. Okay, Joe.
Thank you very much, Mema.
Is that good enough?
Yes, thank you.
It's not exactly the Holocaust story, but it's a different story.
I liked it a lot.
I could have told you the real Holocaust story if I told you about what happened to all your relatives, all the cousins that I had, which would have been your uncles and aunts, that you don't have any alive. They were all exterminated in Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, all of those horrible names, those hells on earth. And I didn't have one uncle that survived, not one cousin. None of my grandparents were also murdered. These were all murdered, and you have to remember it wasn't just murdered by a gun. It was murdered, planned, experimented on. The girls were all experimented on too, which some of you don't know. And they came back after the war, never to live a normal life again, if they came back. Bye, Joe.
Thank you very much, Mema. I
love you very much.
I'll see you Father's Day, right?
Yes.
Okay, I
yes.
love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Love you.